Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this new Spelling album, Mazy. Spelling is the very dark, almost gothic synth pop project of Miss Christia Cabral. Hope I'm saying that right. She's a Bay Area music artist that's dabbled in experimental and avant-garde music for the last few years and has a serious dark side. But around the time when I first discovered her music, her very soulful vocals, as well as the immense atmosphere and occult imagery just scratched so many itches for me. Her 2017 debut album, Pantheon of Me, does take a little while to grow with you. It's definitely a grower. But over time, I just realized it was really getting under my skin in the best way. It is just a seriously twisted album featuring these unbelievably pained vocals and suffocating atmospheres. There isn't a pop hook in sight, but if you love really super atmospheric music that just gets under your skin and you want to feel uncomfortable, this is certainly an album you want to check out. Spelling returned in 2018 with a very short, hard-to-please EP, and while this was only a few minutes long, wow, what a little EP this was. It's just as soulful, dark, and even bluesy at times, but it showed Christia dipping into some more electronics, as well as some heavy synth elements. The result is probably the closest thing you're going to hear to Witch House these days. Yeah, that was a thing a couple of years ago. And honestly, I've been really excited to chat about this album. These singles have been the dark synth pop that I've wanted to hear all year. Let's chat about it. This album starts off with Red, one of the shorter tracks here. Right off the bat, I'm loving this. It just has such a grainy feel to it, which is such a great element. Like, listening to this track, I feel like I picked up some cursed vinyl at a voodoo record shop and I just happened to be spinning it. Now, like I said, it's a pretty short track, but it really does get you in the mood for this very gloomy, witchy mood. Christia's vocals are so unique, so husky, they really do get inside your head at points. And the instrumental here is just so hard to place between these very oddball synths, as well as the constantly shifting guitars. This track is a great intro to this new Spelling album. On the other hand, Haunted Water is a completely different beast. I just absolutely love the hulking atmosphere and these glistening synths. It's times like this that make me realize this might be the first thing that she's doing with Sacred Bones Records, but instantly I'm getting so much chemistry from these two. And once again, while this may not appeal to everyone, this is probably the closest thing you're going to get to Witch House these days. I love that pulsating beat in the background, especially compared up against these other instrumentals that are just so soulful, so pained. And we also get a lot of bluesy elements here, just really wrapping this track up. And Christia, as a performer, is just so damn captivating. 2 thumbs up. Under the Sun, later on in the album, on the other hand, really shows Christia working with much more of a straightforward pop tune. It's still a very nocturnal, very grim synth pop tune at its core, but it's still on the poppier side of things. This is by far one of the easiest to digest tracks here, and while we're at it, it's also the most upbeat track of the bunch. But of course, Christia's performance here is just so haunting, so captivating, it just reminds you just who the hell you're dealing with. There's certainly a campiness to this entire album, this track included, and these synths more often than not do sort of touch the realm of campiness. But the entire package of this track, bookended by this gigantic atmosphere and Christia's incredible performance, makes for one hell of a tune. And Dirty Desert Dreams may be one of my favorite tracks here. I actually really love hearing Christia amongst this much more fleshed out instrumental. There's much more prominent bass, much more prominent drums. It's something we don't get a lot of here, but it's a really nice touch. Honestly, most of the tracks here are pretty slow, so this was a really great wake-up call for me. Not to mention, I do really love the plinking pianos in the background that give this track this sort of evil doo-wop flair to it. Yes, please. Like, honestly, my only complaint here is I wish this track was longer, because this track is fascinating. Now, late in the album, we do get a couple of tracks that I'm not really that into. Secret Thread, for example, it's a strangely refined and stripped down tune, one that I didn't see coming. And honestly, it's not my cup of tea at all. Strangely enough, everything about Christia on this performance is unbearably boring. Even when this instrumental picks up eventually, I just don't get the feeling like I know what Christia was going for here. And worst of all, I feel like the amazing attention to detail has left us. There's no insanely dense atmosphere, and in its place we just get a run-of-the-mill Baroque pop tune with a little bit of a dark side to it. This album's closer, Falling Asleep, kinda seems a little rushed to me. Don't get me wrong, I think the very dense, cosmic atmosphere is something really interesting. Not to mention some of the vocal effects are really great. But I feel like Christia just threw in this track just to give us some closure, but it just feels forced. The atmosphere, the performance, it's all here, but just no substance. And golden numbers as well, I'm not really into. This one shows Christia taking a much more hands-off approach. Like, this track is 100% about Christia and her performance. And as far as that goes, this track is fine. But no, instrumentally, I just feel like this is one of the weaker tracks here. Every other tune here is just so calculating, trying to make you feel uncomfortable. But this one just ends up being way too campy for me. And I just can't help but focus on how much better this track would have been if it had a little bit more of an atmosphere. Outside of that, though, I can't help but rave about a lot of this album. Take Hard to Please, for example, a track that I already knew coming into this album from that EP last year. The glitchy sound effects, the retro synths, Christia's very chilly vocal performance. It's all so straightforward and so simple, but it works so well. And honestly, hearing this track in context with the rest of this album makes it hit so much harder. Christia just has so much of a way about her that she can just really create a very tortured atmosphere so well. Honestly, I'd love to see her push even further, work with some darker instrumentals, get even heavier, go crazy. But for now, this album overall is just a really great piece of freakish synth pop. Melted Wings is instantly captivating, easily being one of the most pained tracks here. But honestly, with just how pained and bluesy this album gets at times, it gives it this very human element, this element of realism that it desperately needs. The lone violin here, the distant synths, it's all so effective. This may be another short little tune, but it just sticks with me so hard. The reprise of Hard to Please is an interesting one. After a bunch of very tense tracks, this track is just one release after another, even beautiful at times. And shockingly enough, Christia really handles herself wonderfully here. She sounds amazing on this big, beautiful hook. Like, this isn't the most mind-boggling track here, but it's certainly necessary for the album, I feel like. There's just one great, tortured synth pop tune after another here. And more than anything, it's in these very stripped down moments, like on Real Fun, that make you focus on Christia so much more. And that's a big deal. This is easily one of the most experimental tracks here, dipping into some avant-garde at one point, but it switches up halfway through and becomes this absolute mammoth of a tune, and I can't help but just sit here completely mesmerized. It's just so big and completely over the top, much like this entire album, and it's right where I want to hear Spelling. So overall, I'm really loving this debut on Sacred Bones Records for Spelling. I feel like this is a real masterclass right now in dark synth pop and, of course, the fabled witch house that people like to chat about. It's this unbearably cosmic, tortured album that just has enough human traits to it to make it come off even that much more twisted, and that excites the hell out of me. Right now, I'm feeling a light 8 on this album. I'm loving it, but I can only imagine what she could do once she gets a couple more albums under her belt, gets a little darker, gets a little heavier. I'm excited to see. But let me know what you guys think about this album down below. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video. And of course, as always, let me know what you guys would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.